we're going to give it up to Michael. But again, without further ado, we're going to give it over to my favorite magic man, Deuce, and he's going to give us a fantastic demo on Raycast Nodes. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kiki. Okay, in Lightwave 11.6 we have quite a number of new features, new things that are coming in that are making it easier for single person 300-person studios, and one of those is a new node in our node-based edit in our node system. This node system is extensive. It goes throughout the entire Lightwave project, and it can control everything from our surfacing to our motion. I mean, it's in everywhere. And this particular one we can actually use in many different locations. But I just want to talk about what this actually does for us. As an animator, or as a setup artist even, when we're trying to place objects, we're trying to put an object onto a table, put a car onto a ground, have a surfer stay on the ocean surface, have a ship sail across the water. What we're wanting to do is we're wanting really to control where our object is existing in our scene. And all objects are not aware of other objects. They're not aware of other surfaces. They're not aware of anything else in their environment. And what the Raycast node allows us to do is to give our objects and give our geometry that ability. So very simply here, I'm going to create a ground plane. We'll give it some segments. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a sphere. This sphere, I'm just going to animate moving across this surface. Not that big of a deal. I mean, my ground plane comes in at 0, my ball gets created at 0, so everything's at 0. So this in itself is not very difficult to do. But what I'm going to do though is I'm going to go ahead and apply it just so that it becomes invisible. So I'm just going to click on Nodal Motion, and this is our node editor. So what I have is I have my inputs and I have my nodal motion outputs, or what I want to control. I want to put up my Raycast geometry node. I can use my search field to pull up any of the nodes that are in my node editor. Makes it easier to find, especially if I know the first name, of it. Double click and I put it in. Now what I'm going to do is raycasting in this particular sense is what I want my object to fire a ray, and then I want that ray to know that it's hit something else. And if it's hit something else, then I want to be able to use that information. So I'm going to take my ball's item position as my ray origin. I'm going to tell it to pay attention to the ground plane, and whatever that intersection, I want it to be my position. So if I move my plane, it's going to know to follow it. I just moved the plane down and up, and it's still staying in contact. The benefit here is that it doesn't matter if it stays flat or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this keyframe here, and I'm going to add onto this ground plane, I want to deform it. Now, we have many different ways inside of Lightwave to deform objects. This just happens to be one of the more straightforward for our particular thing here. And so now the ball is following across that uneven surface. Again, I actually set a keyframe here at the other end. So let me do this. Grab the sphere, and it's one of those things that I'll talk about this here in a minute, is that what we need to have is we need to have it have enough information to know where to start finding my location. So here, very quickly, very easily, I have now made this sphere go across this rough terrain. It doesn't take much to imagine that this could be feet, this could be wheels on a rover, this could be fingers, this could be anything. And it doesn't matter that I have displaced my geometry, it's still going to find it. I can be displacing with a morph, I can be displacing with bones. I can be displacing with, like what I'm doing here, a procedural. And this can even be animated. I could be changing this position across time. And as that is moving, it is still sensing it. So again, this is a very simple little node. It doesn't look all that frightening. It doesn't look all that scary, but it is going to easily become the most used node I can predict in our node editor. Let me pose a problem here. This was fairly simple. This was a fairly simple thing. It wouldn't have taken much. I could have done a few other methods maybe. I could have driven that with a textured environment or something to get that same level. But what if we're dealing with something that's not procedural, that's not created by math, that I can't use in other places? For example, what I'm going to load up here is a camshaft and a cam. So what I want to do is I want to animate this so that if I'm spinning my cam, that my rod follows that uneven shape across my cam. Doing this by hand could be a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Raycast node. So I'm going to, again, pull up nodal motion, drop in the Raycast node, Raycast geometry. Again, item position is my origin. I want it to pay attention to the camshaft. The intersection drives the position. So now all I have to do is position it over one of my cams, locate it, take the cam and rotate it. And so now I've done something that would have taken me by hand an awful lot longer time to do. Now, since I've got one set up, it should just be a matter, and it is just a matter, of me taking this, copy, slide it across, locate, copy it again, one more time, come to here, and one more. And so now I've got one that just needs to have its Y value set just a little bit higher to begin with. And I've now set up that cam animation. This is now being driven by the speed of my cam. If I increased its speed by some other method, it doesn't matter. The Raycast node is doing the work for me. I don't have to sit here and think about trying to figure out this oscillation or trying to figure out the cam. It doesn't matter. It's reading the geometry that's there. And that's what Lightwave is trying to do. It's trying to empower the user. It doesn't want to make it hard. It wants to make it easy. As I've said many, many times before, computers should be labor-saving devices, not labor-creating devices. I always get upset at people who tell me, well, I can't do that because my computer. No, computer should be making it easier, not harder. And that's what we're trying to do here, especially in 11.6. So let's examine a few other options here, a few other things. So again, that's just using one simple thing. Now that looked, again, fairly simple. Well, this particular one doesn't look simple at all. What I have is I have this robot that's spinning through and it's taking a laser and it's burning its environment, and everywhere that it's hitting, I want to see particles being born. Well, this would be a nightmare to try to do by hand, because especially if I want to change later, if my director tells me, well, I need to have this change slower, or no, I don't want it to go I don't want it to go that far over, or whatever, I'm going to have to rekey everything. This looks complicated, but it's not. So let's just delve into it just a little bit. Everything is being all of the magic really is happening right here at this null that I have selected. Again, I'm going to pop open its motion, look at the nodes, and well, you're not really seeing much more than what I had done in those other setups. The only difference is I'm actually pulling, instead of the object itself, instead of my null itself, I'm wanting to get my ray information from another object. In this case, it happens to be a null object inside of this robot. Commonly, well, named gun. I mean, we're shooting a laser. It could be called Mike. It could be called whatever. It doesn't, for this purpose, we're going to call it gun. And all I'm getting is I'm getting 2 bits of information from that null. I'm getting which direction is it pointing. So this is pointing forward. So that's going to be my direction. That's going to be my ray direction. Its world position wants to be where my ray starts from. So those 2 plug in. Again, it's just paying attention to the terrain. That intersect drives the position. That's it. That's then where I have my particles being emitted from. This laser is just an object that is parented again to that same thing. A light is parented to that null. Everything drives from the one null. I move that one null, my laser changes position. And it then spawns the particles where that ray hits. That's it. Again, complicated looking thing, but it's actually very simple when you break it down. One other thing that is new in 11.6, and it's part of the new node editor, is something that I'm going to actually be able to show you here with another simple scene. Let's go ahead though. Let's look at this car track. One of the things that I had done in that cam and I had done on my sphere was I needed to tell it somewhat close to get to the surface that I wanted my ray to intersect. So what I have here is I'm just driving this car up this rotating path, but it's sticking to the surface of my ramp. But the question then comes, well, why, if I'm back here, why is it up on this one and not down on this one? How can it tell the difference? Well, the difference is distance. I'm getting close, it does the remainder. So if I take a keyframe here and pull this down through, you'll see that I then snap to the one below me. So I get close, the node does the rest. Now, this again is a fairly simple thing. I'm not having to deal with much in the way of complicated math, and that's where I'm going to load this next scene up. This next scene is going to allow me to show you a new thing that is part of our node editor. So this Raycast car now is actually doing 2 things. Instead of just locating itself on the surface, it's actually leaning and banking as it's traveling across this uneven ground. Most people don't like doing math. Like I had said before, if you're a one-man show, if you're a one-man studio, you don't have a guy who wears glasses and a pocket protector to do your math. Okay, my pocket protector's in my backpack underneath over there. Doesn't worry, I still wear glasses. So what we have is this particular car. Again, it's just using nodal motion, but I have this. This is a new type of node that is in our node editor, and this is called a compound node. This compound node allows you to do one setup that might be complicated. It might involve that 4-letter word math, but we can save it and we can use it later. So again, I'm just using my item position as my origin. My intersection is going to control my position. That doesn't change. Where I'm using this now is to get the angle of my normal, of the normal that is on this uneven road. That's where I go into this. This is going to be a compound node that ships with Lightwave 11.6, and what this does is it converts the hit normal to a heading, pitch, and bank value. Double clicking on this opens it up, and I can see inside of that node. And so you can see I could go through and explain this, and those of you who aren't asleep right now would be. But suffice it to say that what I'm doing is I'm dragging and I'm pulling the normal information, splitting it up, and creating a heading, pitch, and bank value from the normal angle, and then getting it back out. That then uses the rotation. Thankfully, for all of you, this will ship with 11.6. You can go into it, pull it apart if you want, figure out the math, and learn and go from there. The next look that I want to do involves a little bit more. And this is, you don't have to do object to object. Everything I've shown you so far has been a car, a thing locating itself onto a plane. What this is actually doing is this is using a light that's bouncing off of something else, so we can create effects this way. I'm using an actual light as my ray. Might as well, it's casting light rays. So I'm shooting rays, I'm hitting an angled surface, and this angled surface is in controlling other lights. Again, this is just as simple to set up. It's part of, we just load it into the node editor. So these are a little bit more heady. So let me describe this one as I'm loading it in. Again, I've been using objects or lights as a single point. What I'm going to load up now is to actually use normals as the deformer. So at first glance, what we've got is we've got a tube, and we've got an egg, this odd-shaped egg that's going to go through the tube. In a different part of Lightwave, under the deformation, I have another node editor. This node editor, what I'm doing is I'm pulling the information from the normals of the tube and running it through another compound node. Don't worry, this one comes with Lightwave 11.6 to do a little bit more math to run the displacement. And what this allows is it allows the egg passing through the tube to deform the normals of the tube as, say, a snake swallowing a tennis ball, or food being swallowed, or things being passed through other things. The combinations or the ideas just start coming about this. I know a lot of guys who do medical visualizations I talked to earlier saw this and loved it, because this is always how to get something else to behave as if something is moving inside of it. Again, Raycast Node makes this fairly simple and straightforward, albeit with a little bit of math that's getting into the compound node. Now, when you're talking about rays striking an object and moving, one of the things that some people remember, I don't know, there's a few of you here who would probably remember those pin toys that they used to have, where you had a whole bunch of pins in a case, and as you pushed from behind, it lifted the pins. It was almost a early digitizer. So what we can do using the Raycast node is we have that same level that we can control instances. So what this is doing is these instances are seeing the surface of the face, and as the face pushes through, it's moving those instances as well. So the Raycast node can be used with instancing, it can be used with lights, it can be used with nulls, it can be used with one object seeing another object. But one question that I was asked actually over on one of the pods was, all of the things that I was showing dealt with just one object seeing just one object. Do I have to make my terrain, or do I have to make my whatever all one layer? Do I have to create a proxy object? The answer is no. So very quickly, I'm going to try to create a ground plane here, create a cube, clone this a few times. We can set this one down. I'll create another sphere, and we're going to move this from here all the way over. So as I set up my nodal motion, simple, item position, origin, intersect is to the position. And if I tell it to look at the ground plane object, it sees that. But I can also select those cube objects as well. So I'm not limited to just one layer of my terrain. I can add rocks, I can add other things to it. These can be however I want to do it, just so long as I tell my Raycast node to be aware of those. It all is part of the simulation and it all sees it. Any of these can be animated. If they are moving around, then it's going to see them and move over them. So at this point, anyone here have any kind of questions? Does this spark anything that's like, well, yeah, but you didn't cover, or what if, have you thought about this? Yes, no? No? One of the things, yeah. Does it have anything hitting? It should be on.
Do you guys do anything with skinning, rigging?
With shading?
Skinning, rigging, more rigging, character
absolutely.
Type of stuff.
You can absolutely use this for setting up motion, muscle bulges. So long, that same kind of thing with the egg. If you have set up some geometry underneath and tie that to another bone, you could have that pushing a skin underneath. I haven't done it particularly, I haven't myself, but the idea is there. If I'm moving an egg through a tube and doing it, well then sure, however I control that egg, it's still seeing the same object. It's deforming, then my tube on top is going to deform as well. It's all, I'm looking to you now. I want to see the first, good muscle bulge come out of this, because that's a good idea. I ought to try to set something up, maybe for tomorrow. But yes, the concept is certainly there. So, Lightwave. Lightwave is scalable. It can deal with one person. It can deal with a suite of 200 people. Everything is in the package. We have an unlimited render engine for doing distributed rendering across render farms. All of the surfacing, all the shading is built in. You don't have to be a technical director, you don't have to be a math genius in order to figure out the surfacing. With the addition of the Raycast node, this really gives our technical director and our rigger type people that additional step to make self-aware objects. We don't have to be tied down to only what it sees. If I bring in this particular example, this probe droid, as it's moving across this surface, is actually hopping up and down a little bit as it moves. But at any time, I don't want it to necessarily penetrate through my surface. So as I pull this together, I'm using an add null to be driven by an additional spline curve that's going to add an additional layer over the top of it tracing the surface. Because it is one of those things that this particular surface, if you look at it here, you might actually get some of the triangles. You might see it go flat and then flat and then flat. And if we add just a little float in there, it can help smooth that surface out and make it not seem so harsh and so non-organic. It's just a tool. It's just another piece in the overriding puzzle. So let me load this back in just as something to kind of talk over. It is one of those things that Lightwave is created by artists for artists. Most of the people in the development team at one time used Lightwave to make money, to make jobs, to create visions. Lightwave is trying to do that to everyone, for everyone. If you are a single man studio, and you have a concept, you have a vision, we're trying to give you all the tools necessary so that you can take that from a concept through to completion. Many studios started off this way. Then they get their friends involved, and then it just kind of grows from there. With the addition of the Raycast Node, some of the more difficult to do things are being made a lot easier. So in the little bit of time that we've got left, is there any other thoughts? Yes? No? Kind of makes sense though, doesn't it? I mean, the object is going to be where the ray starts. By default, it shoots down, but we can always change that, and wherever it sees, we can just snap it to it once it gets to it. Fingers on the coffee mug onto a table. All of these are absolute perfect applications for the Raycast Node.